Sure, please. Figure out ways to get the companies that you know and are involved in planting trees with WeForest or any other organization, because it's great that you plant trees yourself, and one tree sequesters roughly a ton of CO2, so that's a lot of trips across the Atlantic. It's even greater if you can get the companies that you're involved with to really put pressure on getting them to plant lots and lots of trees, because our engines of commerce are the most powerful engines that we have ever as a species created.
Welcome everyone. We'd like to introduce today's guest, Bill Liao, serial commercial and social entrepreneur, currently founder of CoderDojo, WeForest, and partner at SOS Ventures, where they live by the mantra, making the impossible inevitable. Hi, Bill.
Hi.
Thanks very much for joining us. There is a lot to get through in this interview, so we want to try and put some steer on it, because you've had a hell of a career. So we want to focus on WeForest, then RebelBio, but I'd love to dig into how it began. I guess that starts with your education, but also a brilliant story I saw in one of your videos about your wife's donation to the World Hunger Project. So if we can take you back to kind of the genesis of you becoming what is sort of a serial entrepreneur now, where that began for you.
Sure. Well, I think in part it started when I was, in school, and that wasn't the good part, right? Because I was pretty, brutally bullied as a half Chinese Australian back in the 70s. That it was great if you were Greek or Italian, but if you're half Chinese, that put a target on you, and so that was quite painful. And I dropped out of school.
Really?
When I was 17, and it took a long time to come back from that. Asian parent, do well at school, dropping out, not so much. And, I was quite nerdy, so I got into computers. That was helpful. At least I have an income. Those times you look at it and you think, well, there's good times, bad times. But it's tough when you don't have a degree and you don't have the stature that you might need to get ahead. There's certainly none of the tech companies back in the 70s would even look at you unless you had maybe 2 PhDs in a relevant discipline. And in Australia, there was no garage startup culture or anything. And so I spent a lot of time in dead-end jobs, and I think the best thing that happened to me was that I did marry my wife. Managed to, as a geeky nerd, to land a good person to be my life partner. And in part because I was interested in a thing called permaculture. And my wife says, the reason she went, oh, okay, maybe there's more to him, is because I was talking about how to make sustainable things happen, like how to grow food and be independent. I wasn't an environmentalist, but I was interested in growing stuff to some degree. And then I did a lot of personal development. I was working in a fairly dead-end job. And I realized through the personal development stuff that the future that you actually set your heart on and commit to gives you a new reality in the present. It changes your actions if you're authentic about it. You can say, oh, I've got this big vision, and then, like most people, do nothing, and then it doesn't give you a new present. If you give yourself a purpose, you set a new future, and you act authentically with integrity, you actually do what you said, and you persevere through the pain, your actions right now are changed. And that's a really fascinating thing, because that gives you an ability to shape who you are, not based on what's happened to you in the past, but based on where you're headed. And that's cool. Now, I thought that was really cool, but I didn't quite get it yet. And one day, my wife came home, because she did the same work with me, and Kerry's amazing. And she came home and she said, oh, Bill, I've just been to a meeting of the Hunger Project. I'm like, oh, okay, what's that? And it says, it's amazing. They're empowering women to end hunger. And it's transformational. It's just like the personal development stuff we've done. And they're creating new futures, and they're speaking them out in the public. And I got so enthused, I just pledged $5,000 to them. You've got to come and see them. Now, we had our first kid on the way, and we had like 30 grand in credit card debt. And I'm like, oh yeah, I got to come and see these guys. I really do. You pledged how much? and I went there with her the next night, and I was like amazed. Yeah, they had 3 Indian village women who had come to Melbourne to assist in the fundraising. And these women had not seen electricity before. And here they were on a stage with a microphone talking through a translator about what they were committing to change in their village. They were describing a future that they were committing to. And you could see them practically changing in front of you, like growing into this role. And, you know, I checked up since they did what they said they were going to do. But right then and there, I was hugely inspired. But of course, I was freaking broke. And so I walked up to Lolita, who's the country director of India at the time, who'd come to Melbourne to fundraise. And, you know, she said, you've got to come on an investor trip. You've got to come and see what happens on the ground. And I said, that's all fantastic, but I've got no money. And she said, look, if you really seriously make a decent pledge, you know, think about what you can do in your future to fulfill on that. Imagine a future where you could pledge even more and deliver it without any suffering on your part. So, like, I'm not asking you to hurt yourself for us. I'm asking you to grow yourself and be generous. And I sort of got that image, you know, in the tuxedo with the big fake check and thinking, yeah, that would be cool. And so I quit my job and I went and I learned how to sell because I knew that the salespeople made more money than I did.
When you say, sorry, quit your job, you mean like very soon afterwards?
Immediately. And I started my first business. And I went out and I learned how to sell. And at the same time as learning how to sell, I realized that the biggest gap in the market, you know, while I was selling, you know, stuff almost door to door, cold calling for somebody else, I realized the biggest gap in the market was that engineers and geeks like myself didn't know how to sell. They couldn't sell. And like, if you're smart enough to code, you should be smart enough to sell. And so I started that first business. I, you know, after learning how to sell and getting reasonably good at that, a lot of failure, I started that first business. And it was a business coaching engineers how to sell stuff. And I did that for a while, and then I sold that business. And I invested and put my time and became a co-founder of a telco in Melbourne in the late 90s at the boom. We did a reverse takeover of a gold mining company. We went from 2 cents a share, which is what I got my stock at, to $6 a share. We had a market cap of $1.2 billion US at that point, which is like the fastest capital appreciation in the history of the Australian stock market. And I went, wow, that's like complete shock.
What was the time? What was the time scale there? Sorry,
it was the 90s. So I, like, at the time that I made my pledge to the Hunger Project, and I pledged 50 grand, I had just turned 30, and by the time I turned 31, I delivered 100 grand, and then I kept investing. And
so, how did you even keep up with your own reality at that point? Because that's just mind-bendingly different.
Do you remember the movie The Matrix?
Yes.
And you know that part where he says there is no spoon?
Yeah.
That was literally our motto. There was like, there is no spoon. You know, like it all just happened. And the really hard part is you get ahead of yourself.
No doubt.
Because like it's too easy for a bit.
But like did you even manage to absorb the fact that you become the fastest growing listing on the Australian market? Like, you set a record. That's not even just like having a company go, well, that's...
it's like strapping on the booster rockets, right? And it's all craziness. All crazy. I understand more about capital markets than most people do now because I've been through both the upcycle and the downcycle and the upcycle again. Because I've been part of the founding team, co-founded 2 unicorns, not 1. All right, so we did Zing later on, on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. I've seen it, and it is a different world. Like the going public thing, it's not very fashionable right now. Most people are like, oh, sell out to another company or whatever. Actually, the big game, public companies are amazing. You can get a lot done with a public company.
And when you do that, how do you then reevaluate your view of your future self such that your future self can still continue guiding you as an exemplar? Is it easy to do, or do you think, I've completed the game here?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question, and the reality is that I think a lot of people, and myself included, right, for a while you're like, is this did I get a ticket for this thing? Like, am I really here? And then some people just focus on the money. And I think, you look at, there are some pretty decent studies that show that if you focus just on money and you increase your level of success and just focus on money and returns, you start to lose your empathy.
Right.
And I watched several people go off the rails. I've seen very successful people develop deep problems, drug habits, sex addiction, blow their marriages apart, blow their families apart. And if you think about empathy, the difference between a psychopath, a sociopath, an aggressive narcissist, and a good person is really whether you're an empath or not. Your mirror neurons are working or they're not working. If they're not working, you're a kind of dangerous individual, but also you can be as much harm to yourself as society. And so how do you keep empathy? And I asked myself this question, right? How does that future keep informing a present that's worthwhile? And the answer is, take on problems that are bigger than you. Take on problems that are bigger than anything that you can imagine. In fact, there's a kind of joy in taking on an enormous problem because it makes parking tickets look really inconsequential.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, did you have an absolute belief between company 1 and company 2 that you could execute and deliver that same result again? Because I think some people get breakout success and then I don't know if they are certain of their own credentials. And when you had done that and you went into your second enterprises, did you have a steadfast belief you could just be successful again?
I had a steadfast belief, and I still have a steadfast belief, that I can knuckle down and get the job done.
So the process.
The grit. There's actually a great book called Grit. It's well worth reading. It's the number one correlate to success is your grit. They did a study at West Point, and they looked at people. Like, West Point's really hard, right? You're gonna see some serious shit if you go into West Point. They're gonna pound you, and nothing correlated except for grit. The sheer will to pick yourself up after being punched in the face a few times. And I didn't immediately go in from company 1 to company 2. I tried other stuff. I had a failed startup. I lost millions of dollars on that. I lost $1 million trying to make a movie because I didn't understand the movie industry, and you have to get distribution, and if you don't get distribution money you can never get your film distributed. Like, there's a whole lot of rules in a whole lot of different industries that you just have no clue about, and you wander in thinking, I could probably do this, and then you go, geez, no, I can't. Expensive lessons.
Yeah, well, they're often the only way you learn them. You can think about it all the time until you feel it.
Failure is actually the only way you really learn.
Yeah.
Which is why examining somebody else's success is not particularly useful. It does make you feel really good, though.
It definitely does.
And that's a problem, because the better you feel, the less productive you tend to be.
With regards to grit, without kind of dipping into your childhood too much, is that where some of that came from, do you think?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, staying sane and not becoming a victim.
Yeah.
It's very easy to start telling yourself that you have an entitlement because somebody else has hurt you.
Yeah.
And that's the dark side of that mentality, is that you actually feel a sense of entitlement because you're the victim. Right? And society wants to reach out and help you. And, don't get me wrong, somebody hurts somebody else, the person doing the hurting is not in the right. Yeah, they deserve to be, punished or put away or whatever. At the same time, if you, as the person who's being hurt, don't learn to forgive them, you're actually carrying that suffering with you. And that's a really stupid thing to do. Like, the more you hold on to suffering, the more you're not forgiving, the more you're hurting.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, we think that the person who did the hurting, the person who did the damage, if we don't forgive them, that somehow they're punished by us holding on to the suffering. Hang on a second.
They don't care.
They're freely distributed,
Exactly.
handed out like it's going out of style.
Yeah, exactly. So when you forgive them, you actually are letting go of your own suffering. And if you do it really well, they find it very irritating.
That's why Ollie's question is salient, because you can come out of wild success with a chip on your shoulder, and then you're actually no better off.
Yeah.
You still want to prove something to the world, and you've proved a lot to yourself, but you can ruin everything around you.
It also doesn't feel any different. 3 days after you've had your most successful success doesn't feel very different to 3 days before.
Yeah.
It also doesn't feel very different 3 days after your worst failure.
And what was the next impossible challenge that you set yourself to give yourself a worthy future self to be?
So the purpose in life, or the purpose that you have, you talked about SOS Ventures, our motto, if you like. It's actually a purpose statement. We, as general partners, sat around and we nutted out and we thought about what it is that we really wanted to see as a change in the world. And we set our purpose as making impossible things inevitable. Now, I'm a great believer in purposeful organizations. Everything that I do now, it's got to be purposeful. So my personal purpose is a world that works for all life. That's what gets me up in the morning. And every challenge that I take fits with the purpose. So the purpose is the inspiration that I've set. That's the future that I'm living into. And everything I do has got to align with that. And everything I do does. I mean, the impossible to inevitable, the SOSV fund, those things all contribute towards a world that works for life.
Yeah.
And so when was SOSV set up?
So Sean O'Sullivan, it's SOSV, Sean O'Sullivan,
Right.
set up SOSV 15, 20 years ago, something like that. He invented moving maps. Right? You've seen Google Street View and all that. He invented moving maps.
Right.
He had this thing called MapFlow. And he took that public and he got an exit and he invested that pretty wisely. So the fund started as a family office and it grew. He turned, I think, like 15 million into well over 150, 200 million. And then he started collecting people like me to actually build the fund up. We did Fund 1, was his primarily. I did a little investing in Fund 1. We did Fund 2 to get our first limited partner, which was in Ireland. And then we've raised Fund 3, and now we're raising Fund 4. So it's been a continuous growth.
Christ. And so you joined that. What was your inclination or mandate to be involved? And did you start off as a silent investor into the fund and then joined as a general partner?
No, I went straight in as a general partner because, particularly in Ireland, where Sean was living at the time, he now lives in Princeton, he was looking around at so many investment opportunities and he didn't have time. And he was like, well, you've had a good investment track record. I ran a small fund in Switzerland as well. And we met each other, and it was kind of cool little pond in Ireland, and we got along really well, and we're still obviously great friends, and we got together and we started investing, and we had some early successes. There was a company called Storyful by a journalist in Ireland called Mark Little, and we sold that to News Corp for 21 mil, and did a few others. A gaming company in Romania called Mavenhut. We had a big partial exit there, and a few other interesting things. And then one of our core businesses that he set up with one of the other partners, Cyril, is a hardware accelerator called Hacks, and that's in Shenzhen in China. And Hacks is we had China Accelerator and Hacks is been a huge success. Like I think 9 out of the 10 top Kickstarters ever are Hacks companies. It's like really, it might be a little different to that number, but it's big, right? We've got many multi-million-dollar Kickstarters, which are rare, and they're Hacks companies. And my daughter developed type 1 diabetes when she was 12. And so about, she's 19 now, so it would have been 7 years ago, and I was devastated by that, and she nearly died. And I was looking at the biotech side of things, and I'd had some biotech experience in the past as a microscopist, and I was like,
a what, sorry?
Microscopist, somebody who looks down a microscope.
Okay, right.
And you have a tally clicker, you count stuff.
What were you looking at?
I was looking at laser scanning fiber optic confocal microscopy images of chips and then of cells that were fluorescent. Don't ask. Anyway, so I was looking at the condition, and we live on a little organic farm, just a small holding in West Cork, right by the sea. We're pretty, idyllic sort of place to live, and we're kind of self-sufficient. Like, we have geese and chickens, and we grow asparagus and zucchinis, and here my daughter has this malady where we are completely dependent on the industrial pharma complex, like 100%. She doesn't have insulin for a few days, she's done. And so I'm looking at this going, well, can I make this stuff? And 6 years ago when I looked at it first, it would have cost me a couple of $1 million to put together a lab to make insulin that she could inject. Clearly not a home operation. And I kept looking at it though because I was interested, and I noticed that the cost of the equipment was coming down incredibly fast. And so within less than 2 years, it was a couple of $100,000. And I'm like, wow, that's democratization. That's fast. And so I did this little plot of Moore's law versus the cost of sequencing. And Moore's law looks like a flat line because sequencing cost came down 10 million fold in the previous 12 years to when I was looking. It's even cheaper now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you see a cost decrease like that in an incredibly high-tech industry that's universally applicable, you got to kind of pay attention. And so I went to the other partners, and I went to Sean and I said, guys, we need to do a biotech accelerator. And he was like, huh? I'm like, no, really, seriously, look at this. And so we did it. We're quite an entrepreneurial firm, so we test stuff. We move fast, we break stuff, we tried. So we did, in 2004, we did this, we put together that first accelerator. It was the first biotech accelerator in the world. And we got 30 applications. We took 6 companies. 4 of those companies still exist today and are doing well. And one of them, Perfect Day, they just raised 25 million on a 60 million valuation, and they make milk without cows.
Cool. How?
They modify yeast to produce all the components of milk, and then they harvest those components, and it is identical, like not even a close. It's actual milk without a cow.
Because even the dairy industry is under attack because people criticize the meat industry, but the bad practices extend to lots of industrialized farming. So that's is that out for consumption?
Perfect Day, they're making the components in kilo amounts right now, and I suggest that it'll be showing up in products late this year, early next year. I know they're scaling up to do tons right now.
And what about the insulin? Did you find a company that's...
So it's interesting, in the last batch of RebelBio we had in Cork, we have a company called Cellfree, and they were able to make proto-insulin for about $99. And that's getting very close. So not a lot more, thousands, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, not millions to make insulin. And it's going to get even cheaper. There is no global grand challenge that cannot yield to biotechnology as a solution. And whether you're talking about health, whether you're talking about environment, whether you're talking about manufacturing, whether you're talking about computers, entertainment, you name it, there is a biotech solution for pretty much anything you can think of.
What's your view on CRISPR?
CRISPR is amazing. I have a company called Sygenica, which makes a tiny little molecule that can penetrate cells without harming them. And right now they're working to bond CRISPR to that little molecule, and that will mean that you can do a CRISPR task on a living cell inside a living organism while it's alive without harming it. You could change its DNA on the fly. CRISPR gives you the precision. Sequencing tells you what to change. We've already talked about how cheap sequencing is, and now we have this little molecule from Syngenta, which is basically a universal delivery device. And already, some people have had their cancer cured with CRISPR. The CAR T therapy, you take out the you take out the immune cells, you modify them with CRISPR, you re-inject them, and you go into remission. And several people have actually had that therapy. The problem has been that therapy is very expensive, and it takes a long time. There are 3 companies in RebelBio and in IndieBio across them that have solutions to all the problems that make CRISPR expensive and difficult. So we're going to see an absolutely massive revolution in everything to do with health, and starting yesterday.
Somebody in a talk I watched in the Next Web called Jason Silver said that innovations in this space were growing at 3 times exponential. He said there's an exponential curve, and what we're charting is that we're going through the code bases of DNA. We're just accelerating at a rate we've never seen, which I guess, if we look back to the computer and Moore's law, you'd be crazy if you saw that evidence not to jump into that industry with keen interest.
And let's face it, it beats cat videos.
Yeah.
If you're a coder, DNA is digital. DNA itself is digital, right? So you can actually, it's like machine code. You can code in DNA. There are companies like in London, I invested in a company called Synthase. They have written a high-level language, an abstraction layer to go on top of DNA. It's called Anther. And so if you can script, you can actually code in DNA. And we have companies that can take that code, and like there's a company in Austria that we invested in, it's called Kilobaser. You can take that code and you can load it into the Kilobaser, and the Kilobaser will make those oligos for you overnight on a desktop.
So it prints
DNA. Right?
Wow.
And you can take those oligos and you can take Drop Genie, and you can actually put them directly into their lab on chip, and you can do a CRISPR transformation. The whole supply chain, everything could fit on this desk.
But do you have any concerns over the applications that this could be put to? I mean, obviously there's the healthcare stuff, which is great, but you want to kill a lot of people, you just make ricin. It's totally lethal. It is fairly easy to make. It's a bad idea, right? If you want to kill a lot of people, go down and collect some Ebola samples and aerosolize them. There's lots of ways to kill people. You don't need. Okay, but what if you
this tech?
What if we identified the DNA that was responsible for intelligence? Say that we could do that, then there's a cost to
very hard.
Okay, but just indulge me.
Yeah.
So then we could. There would be a cost involved with having your intelligence increased by having your DNA changed. You then create 2 sorts of people: the people who could afford the intelligence boost by having the CRISPR, and the people who couldn't. Now that is a scary situation.
Here's the question. That future is inevitable. It's already going to happen.
How do you solve?
The question is, how do you make it cheap enough so that anyone can do it? The question is, how do you keep that, around for everyone? And the answer is things like Kilobaser, where somebody can set up a lab and they can do it and they can download it, and there's a big open source library. The other answer is open source.
Right. So you're saying that other markets.
You've got Cell-free, you've got other initiatives in open source. I'm a big fan of open source, and so if you democratize this technology enough and everyone has it, then it doesn't become the purview of the very expensive. I mean, right now we have that problem where only somebody who has $300,000 can guarantee cure their leukemia without side effects. Right? I'm sorry, that problem exists right now.
Sure.
The haves and have-not, totally. How do you leapfrog a have-not to a have? Democratization of the technology. And this is one of the huge opportunities for sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, where you've actually got quite a lot of calories hitting the planet, but you've got some problems with water, you've got some problems with medicine, you've got some problems with education, you've got some problems with vitamins. these are all things that you can solve so much more easily if you have really good biotechnology that's democratized.
And it might masquerade as something else, because if, let's say, producing insulin is driving the costs down, then actually you're driving down the costs of going to Kilobase, you're driving down the costs of people who can code in this DNA language. And then I guess as soon as you need to turn the hand to something else, it's like a web developer who develops in React and can build.
Exactly. And a web developer who can develop in React can also start to develop in DNA. And that's what's cool. The problem we have actually is we just don't have enough developers, full stop. I mean, that's why I co-founded CoderDojo, is because, 7 years ago when I looked, because I was always wondering, why is it as a VC I have so many people come to me with marketing degrees and MBAs and no coders?
Because it's hard.
And I'm like, well, it's actually not that hard. Right? But why? And the answer is this. The reason it's hard is because it's a language skill.
Yeah.
And your best time to learn a language, 5 to 17. By the time you get to college, it's a real struggle to get really fluent in a new language. And yet, when I looked around 7 years ago, there was not one single school I could find anywhere, including Silicon Valley, where they were teaching 8-year-olds how to code. The prime time to learn that language skill, no one was exposing them to it. The only people who were getting exposed to it were people like myself who learned in their backyard, which is not a great place to learn. And so we created CoderDojo literally with the focus on empowering particularly women, particularly young girls, to have access to this incredible ability to make stuff. And that incredible ability to make stuff is only going to get more incredible with biotech. If you can program a CNC machine to make an object, that's great. If you can program a bacteria to make the same object but nearly for free, that's amazing.
Yeah. So with that in mind, is baked into the ethos of CoderDojo an awareness of the problems that the kids may want to focus their attention on, or is it just practical skills?
It's pretty hard to tell a 5-year-old.
But just maybe some ethics or stuff you can get them excited about, because I remember as a kid it was very important to me what I looked up to.
I think if I could code Snake 2 when I was a kid, I'd be pretty happy.
It's definitely better than where we are now, where I definitely can't code Snake 2.
Exactly. Here's the thing. There's one rule for kids in CoderDojo. There's some rules for the adults, but there's one rule for kids in CoderDojo. Because when we created it, it was my job to come up with the branding, the logo, the name, and the rule set, the context within which you want the emergent phenomena. And learning is an emergent phenomena, right? So unless you create the context within which it can emerge, not going to happen. And so, you talk about corporate culture all the time. That's actually just how you be about stuff. And how you be about stuff is set by the context. Those are emergent properties. So I was looking at those emergent phenomena and I was thinking, how do you create a rule set that creates context sufficient to get kids to be inspired by it and yet also know what the boundaries are? Because it's the edge conditions that also test you.
Yep.
And I looked at, all the different youth organizations and I noticed this one amazing trend, right? All of the rules that I could find were negative prescriptive. Now, I know as a parent, the last thing you want to do if you want a kid to not do something is tell them not to do it, right? That's like a recipe for disaster. So I thought, well, what if we make all the rules of CoderDojo positive, aspirational? And so we did. And we started with 10 different rules and we looked at them and we thought, well, actually, a lot of the stuff that those rules say, you could crash down into one rule or 2 rules. So we got down to 3 rules and then we got down to 2 rules and then we thought, well, wow, all the stuff that we don't want is just kind of uncool. Why don't we just make it 1 rule? Be cool. And it worked.
So they also, because it gives them room to define it themselves.
Exactly.
Which is you need the imagination.
Exactly. And it's taken off like wildfire.
Yeah, where is it at today? Because I read some pretty impressive stats.
I think we added another 360 dojos just in the last 6 months. So we're at a couple of thousand dojos, and then there's Code Club, which is also our partner. There's 10,000 of those, in schools. We're in, I think, 96 countries now. And by the way, one of the things that I learned in this journey is the power of language. If you get good language, you brand things well and you can articulate them well, you become a thing much faster and much cheaper. So when we started CoderDojo, we got the name and we did some testing, and we'd been doing it for about 3 months, and then we opened the next dojo and we copycatted and we cloned all the language. We looked at what were some of the fundamental things that were going to drive adoption, and we realized that if you charge for learning, you actually create an inequality. And so we made it resolutely free forever free. And we were like, well, if it's free forever free, how on earth are we going to afford to have it expand? And we took a gamble on just making the language really easy. And we got to 127 dojos in 27 countries without even opening a bank account.
How does that work?
What, volunteers?
All volunteerism. And I might add, about $100 million worth of computer consultancy if you just added up all the coders who donated their time at that time. I mean, I can't even imagine how much it's worth now. And we've had CoderDojos at the US State Department. We've had CoderDojos in Buckingham Palace. We've had CoderDojos, all over the world. In Pune, in India, in a village where they didn't have electricity, they had a dojo that ran CS Unplugged, which is the Computer Science Unplugged curriculum, and they were doing binary with sticks, and it all worked, and it still works, and it's expanding. And we merged with Raspberry Pi Foundation last year.
Wow.
And we've just continuing to expand that whole area.
What's their involvement with you, or just allowing people to code onto Raspberry Pi?
Raspberry Pi Foundation is an educational foundation. The Raspberry Pis, the money from the business actually goes to the charitable foundation. And they acquired Code Club, and then we merged in CoderDojo. So we're actually now combined the largest coding for kids organization on planet Earth. And, kind of happy with that.
But
it's a pretty good legacy. It's a very powerful legacy if people are coding our genomes in the future, or when your identity is Sensei Liao on the walls.
It's not just down to me, it's down to all the people. I mean, it's like, I cannot take credit for all this. It's yes, I'm one of the founders of CoderDojo, but even Upton, Jack Lang, all these great guys at Raspberry Pi, Philip Colgan, James Welton, my co-founder, Justina Mirzoni, all these people that put all their time and effort into all this stuff. It's just great that it works, though.
It's so empowering. I mean, I wish it was around when we were kids.
For 15 years, which is literally my brother is 15 years younger than me. So for 15 years, there's been a gap where virtually no one has gotten any kids to learn how to code, and that was just stupid, just plain dumb. How did it happen that one of the most powerful skills that you could possibly learn was completely erased from the educational curriculum for more than a decade? How can that be? I mean, I homeschooled my kids, right? Because I had a few issues with schools. Now, I don't actually have that much against schools, but I thought I could do a better job with my kids, and most people think that they're okay, right? So the jury's still out, but they seem to be pretty good kids. I didn't even realize that the coding curriculum had been erased until as a VC, I just kept getting frustrated, and then young James Welton walks into my office one day and goes, "I'd like some money for my startup." And I'm like, "Great, James. Who's in your startup? What's the team?" And he said, "Well, there's 3 coders, including myself." And I'm like, "Hang on, you haven't even done your leaving certificate in Ireland. How do you have 3 coders when the last 7 startups didn't have one between them?" And he said, "Well, I taught them." I'm like, "What do you mean you taught them?" He said, "Well, I learned in my bedroom, and I won a Web Award, and over the school PA system, I was congratulated for winning the Web Award by the school, headmaster. And all these kids sought me out not to beat me up as a nerd, but to beg me to teach them how to make a web page. And he did. He ran a lunchtime club. And I was like, great, that's amazing. You must be so proud and happy. And he said, no, I'm actually really miserable because I've just done my leaving cert and they're shutting the club down because there's no one to run it.
Right.
And this is one of the best schools in Ireland. There's a private school. You know, James's parents are both dentists. Private school, good school. Didn't have anyone who could run even a computer club. That was 7 years ago. And at that moment, those two worlds collided, right? I'm like a VC with no coders anywhere, and what, you mean they don't teach it in schools?
It's unreal. I mean, because we just take it as a given that these things, because there's so many of the courses online now that you assume that everybody's been given a democratized approach, but you know, who knows what the outcomes of
online courses. There isn't any syllabuses though in schools.
No,
it's just been added in Ireland to the junior certificate. It's just been added, and I think that it's going to make a leaving certificate thing. I'm not sure that schools are a great place to learn languages anyway. Nevertheless, everyone should get the exposure. They should get some taste of it. Even if somebody goes to a CoderDojo for 1 hour, they will never again look at a computer and think the computer can say no to me. And that is valuable in and of itself, because the number of people I see go, "Oh, computer says no," to quote a comedy routine. It's incredible. You know, there's a genuine fear of technology because people don't understand. And like, computers are very prosaic. Here's the thing: DNA is very prosaic when you get right down to it.
Right.
There's layer and layer of complexity. There's, you know, you can do 10 doctoral degrees and not get to the end of it. But still, at the end of the day, it's a very simple set of instructions.
But it's funny because now it's not computer says no.
Yeah.
With that problem, is it even genome says no? It's like our suspicion of what our relationship with that technology is will be even more abstracted, I guess, because it's not just a machine that you switch on and off and then can use as a sandpit. It's potentially genetic code, which, I mean, God, the possibilities, as you say, are endless.
Have you flown on an airplane recently?
I have.
Did you pay any attention to the code base of the autopilot?
I did not.
Your life was depending on it.
Heavily, yeah.
Yeah. Did you care? Did you even think about it?
I was on a stag do, so
you couldn't think about it.
I wasn't allowed to think about such things.
Look at the time before you flew. Look at any time you've flown. In fact, any time in your life you've flown, have you thought about the code base of the autopilot?
No, I am aware that the planes do a lot of their own flying, and it's as good as a nominal oversight that humans are able to afford it now. But
a lot of the planes do better flying than humans ever will. Still, you don't really care.
Yeah.
As long as it works, you don't really care. I mean, look at the disaster. Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, oh, the world is ending, oh, the elections are being thrown, blah, 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 blah. How much actual change has there been?
Well, and what you're showing, I think, that is part of my argument to people who feel that we're just running down the lazy river of politics, sending us on our way, is that you can take agency. And I think one thing I'm taking heart from with your stories is you can empower people to pass knowledge on to other people for a good cause.
Taking agency is really important. And that's the difference. That's the thing that has us have a potentially bright future from all this, is enough people taking agency. Both the democratization and the learning, and not education, learning of these skills. That's what gives me some hope. You know, if we were to have a significant outbreak of a pandemic pathogen, a new one, it'll probably be somebody hacking at that gets a cure out faster in 5 or 6 years' time. That could save us all. And I'm very much up for that future. The future where, you know, we're all afraid of technology. Well, I'm not so sure we're all afraid of technology, because we've had some pretty bad things happen. And kind of, that's okay. We're not terrified.
Speaking of the future and taking agency and collective action, it's probably a good moment to pass on to climate change. And of course, it's surprising with everything else that we've just discussed that you have time to worry about this too. So tell us a bit about how WeForest got started.
So I was doing some work for the government of St Kitts and Nevis, and they suggested that they might like me to participate in some UN negotiations for me, and I didn't for them, right? And I didn't really take it all that seriously, and then I ended up with a diplomatic passport, and which I can show you later if you like. And I ended up in the UN talking about climate, and I was like, as I said before, I wasn't really an environmentalist, but I was a homeschooler, and so in order to prep for this, I was sitting down in front of a computer with my daughter, who at the time was 9-ish, and 8 or 9, and we were going through all the news about climate change and all the readily accessible stuff. And she looked up at me at one point and she said, "Daddy, you broke the planet. You better fix it."
The 80s definitely did some damage to the planet. I don't know if that was your hand, but yeah.
Hey, listen, my generation, if you count sort of my generation as being anyone who is sort of born between like 1960 and 1975, we've done more damage to the planet than every other generation of humans combined.
Even the ones, the subsequent ones?
Everyone.
Screw you, Bill.
Hey, I resemble that remark. And so my view is, rather than making it my daughter's problem, I want to fix it before she has to inherit it, or you have to inherit it. Now, I looked around, because when I started this, I'm like, wow, this is really miserable.
Bleak.
And here's the problem. When you tell a human that it's all going to turn to shit, what's the first thing they do?
Head in the sand.
Yeah, they deny it.
Yeah.
All right, so the environmental movement, up until that point, had done a really spectacular job of creating the largest denial movement in history.
Because they did a big move to park electric vehicles in the 70s, wasn't it? The oil embargo, so it was emerging, and they deny.
And they got all killed. They all got killed. And it's so easy to get people afraid and of the message, and then to deny everything. So when I was looking at this, as tuned into language as I am, and as sensitive to how you structure context, I looked at it and went, there is just no positive message here. There's just none. And when you look at the numbers, a lot of the interventions that sort of work are kind of really pathetic. There's like, for instance, recycling plastic. Right? Recycling plastic, yes, there's a sort of net benefit there. A lot of people just want to turn plastic into fuel. Well, then you burn it and it ends up as carbon in the atmosphere. Your net benefit's very small. You're kind of better off burying it again. And then it might turn back into oil. But nobody is going to advocate landfill for plastic. So a lot of the interventions they don't make sense. You just do the numbers and they're like, eh. So what do? And so I set about abusing my diplomatic powers. I went and I rang people, and I said, "Oh, listen, I'm with the Prime Minister's office, and I'd be interested in hearing a layman's explanation of your research." And it's surprising how many people, when they hear the words Prime Minister's office, even though it's a tiny island state, you don't have to say that, but you just say Prime Minister's office, they tell you everything. And after enough research, I discovered this one very interesting little fact. Trees make clouds. Now, growing up as I did, one of the biggest fears wasn't climate change. It was a thing called a nuclear winter. A nuclear winter happens when you have a nuclear battle that blows particulate matter into the atmosphere, and you get clouds. And the clouds block out the sunlight, and you freeze the planet. And everybody dies. And I thought to myself, well, if nuclear bombs can create enough cloud that you will destroy civilization, surely, if there's a gentler way of making clouds, you could cool the planet down, because clouds reflect sunlight. And when I first did the numbers and I was talking to some of the modelers, I got a lot of denial. So first thing was I would go to foresters and I'd say, hey, did you know that trees make clouds? And they go, yeah, we know trees make clouds. It's very clear. They create, polyaromatic hydrocarbons that go into the air, and they have little bacteria, microbiology. They have Aerobacter orogenies that sweep up into the atmosphere, and these things seed clouds better than anything man-made. So we know. We've got all these images of low-level cloud cover forming over forests in high temperatures. Which is where you really need to stimulate clouds. It's the hot spots, the equator. So I'm like, great, that's fantastic. Do you know we could cool the whole planet that way? And they're like, oh no, I don't think the models would work. It's a local effect. And so I'd go, well, who are the best climate models? And well, the Oceanographic Institutes are very good at climate models. So I go to the oceanographic people and I go like, guys, do you know that if you make enough clouds, you could cool the planet down? And they said, yeah, we did all that modeling for the nuclear winter. And you know what? We have this multi-trillion-dollar project where we're going to float giant ships onto the ocean and spray water into the air and cool the planet down. And it's only going to cost $100 trillion. I'm like, that's great. But did you know that trees can make clouds? And they're like, nah. And so after many years, the IPCC and the UN process, which takes 12 years for science to get recognized, after many years the IPCC said, trees actually can mitigate climate change. It took 12 years. And I'm like, okay, well, the UN's not going to fix it. So why don't we start a charity to fix it? Why don't we start planting trees? And I'd already worked with the Hunger Project. So I knew a lot about how you can interact with local peoples to do positive things. And the fact is, a tree has to be worth more alive to them than dead. And it's not just because you pay them. Like, a lot of people donated money for trees, and they did this greenbelt thing and all the rest of it. All those trees got cut down for charcoal, right? Because they were not valuable to the local people, and they were very happy to get another lot of donations to plant more trees. So let's clear off these and plant some more. No. You've got to have the trees valuable. And that means you've got to create a thing called a food forest. You've got to actually have trees that create crops. You've got to use a thing called permaculture. Remember way back when I talked about permaculture?
Yeah.
And I can promise you that a village head woman is going to cut her husband's nuts off before he cuts her nut tree down. All right? Value the tree. Make it valuable. So we started WeForest. After coming across this research, a guy called Walter Jane in Australia, we planted our first 10,000 trees as a sort of token effort. And I realized that we also needed a supply chain because you need to get the cost of the tree down. We need to do better modeling. I went and talked at TED. And at that time I said, okay, it's 2 trillion trees that we need, and I'll commit to doing that. And I swore off flying back then until we could plant a meaningful number of trees, or until I could get an airline to plant trees. So far I haven't got an airline to plant trees. I'm maybe close. It's been 10 years since I set foot in an aircraft.
Wow.
And
how do you get back to Australia?
I don't go back to Australia. I live in West Cork.
Christ.
I've crossed the Atlantic by freighter multiple times. I got here by the ferry and the train. It takes me 12 hours door to door. I'm here every week during RebelBio. I do that back and forth. It's painful. I'm really looking forward to flying again. And yes, I know about autopilot coding and I don't care. But I set myself 100 million trees now, or an airline planting trees with us. It turns out we need 187 billion trees to actually end global warming, as far as I can tell. And we've gotten it down from $10 for a sustainable tree to £1 a sustainable tree. So for less than 200 billion pounds, you could actually end global warming, which costs us £500 billion every year in storm damage.
And more.
And the rest on its way.
Yeah, and the rest on its way. So here is a positive message. Plant enough trees, you can actually fix the problem.
In the right places.
Yeah, I was going to say.
In the right places. Now, we actually have more trees on Earth now than we did 30 years ago. But they're in the wrong places. Well, they're in good places, but they're not in the perfect place. The perfect place is the deforested land around the equator. Trees restore the water cycle. You see, rainforests don't grow where it rains. It rains where there are rainforests.
Yeah.
The Sahara Desert, they have mystery of the pyramids. How could you construct pyramids? We move these big stone blocks because there wasn't enough timber to move them around. Actually, there was. It was a rainforest. And they cut it down, and it turned into a desert. The whole Sahara Desert was once a rainforest, and humans cut down the trees.
It's funny, I think our inability to understand that is we don't give historical man enough credit for their ability to have cut down trees and wipe out species. They were pretty good at industrial.
We're an amazing predator. Like, just amazing. You want to wipe out a species?
Yeah.
Come to humanity. We're good at that.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't it, a squirrel could go from Land's End to John O'Groats without touching the ground?
Yep.
100 years ago? Or not that long ago.
Not that long ago. The whole of Ireland was an oak forest. Like, literally the whole thing, except where it was bog. It was bog or oak forest.
We went down to 7%, and I think we're back up to about 11 or 12 now.
Yeah.
But then I think a fact about that surprises me is that none of that was old forest. All of that was actually planted. The same as all the forests in Europe. They're all planted forests. The only old forests left are in certain parts of North America and I think obviously the rainforest.
Small parts of Europe have wild apples.
Right.
And wild bits of forest. There are little holdouts of wild forest, but actually most of it's planted timber.
Yeah.
And we absolutely, there's like 4.5 billion unemployed people sitting right next to 20 million square kilometres of degraded land that could all be turned into forest very cost effectively. The 20 million trees that we'll have planted by sort of any day now, I think we're at 17 million, but we're about to announce 20 million. We've got them in the bank. They have not cost more than $20 million. So we've proved the supply chain model, right? And a lot of people buy our trees as a marketing thing. Like, we love the marketing department. Who doesn't want a tree? Right?
It's so tangible.
And we have campaigns like buy two, get one tree.
In Ireland, that'd go down a tree.
And the thing about buy two, get one tree is you actually make more profit on the sale because you're bundling and you're halving your customer acquisition cost.
Yeah.
So you can profitably do this. You can lift women out of poverty. You can lift villages out of poverty. You can restore wildlife habitat. You can restore rainfall, and you can end global warming, all with a very, very simple intervention.
Is it? But I mean, if they're permaculture trees, then presumably they're not like the grand old trees that you find in rainforests. But do they have the same effect?
They do have the same effect. The food forests is what we're looking for, and you have local species as well as you put in. I mean, we would never introduce a species that wasn't already in a country, but we would certainly, mobilize what species we can that are going to deliver income. Because your alternative is a whole bunch of dead trees.
Yeah.
Right, a whole bunch of cut charcoal.
Fires.
Because if you don't make it valuable, if you don't make it part of the solution for the local people, then you're doing them a disservice, and it's not going to last.
Yeah.
Can you help by, or do you think the trend towards, let's say, cheaper renewable fuel sources will help them not cut down trees for biofuel?
Maybe.
Every little helps.
Every little helps. I'm much more interested in them growing food forests and relying on the calories that those food forests produce to actually lift them out of poverty.
How do you map that when you think of 200 billion trees? Because clearly a food forest may become so successful that there's a glut of supply again. They're incentivized to start cutting down trees again. So is there a way you can model where best to focus your attentions?
There's so many people who are living so poorly that the demand for those extra calories not going away anytime soon. Right. And let's face it, our agricultural miracle isn't all that it's cracked up to be. You can feed 4.5 people off an acre of wheat sustainably, but it's a pretty boring diet, even though we've found ways of making wheat and corn into just about any foodstuff you can imagine. It's still basically wheat or corn. It takes 10 calories of oil to make 1 calorie of corn or 1 calorie of wheat. That's not very sustainable. In an acre of food forest, you can feed 10 people forever. You don't need any oil input. You just need a little bit of work on their behalf, and it's far less work if it's a permaculture system than the calories they get out. Now, I don't know about you, but I think we've won when people want to move from London to Zambia because the lifestyle and the food and the fulfillment is actually better. You live a better life there. What do you need for that? You need first quality telecommunications because we like our entertainment, and you need amazing healthcare. Well, half of healthcare is diet. It really is. And the remainder can be done with the democratization of biotechnology.
So to get you from this 20 million trees onwards, obviously an airline would help. You're suggesting things are picking up and speeding up. How is that going to look in the next couple of years for you? Are you quite optimistic?
I'm reasonably optimistic. We've managed to double our planting. Not the total number of trees planted, but the number we plant. We've doubled every year.
Wow.
Right? So for 10 years, we've been doubling. Okay, not for 10 years, 9 years. The first year we didn't double because we just did those 10,000 trees and we had no idea what we were doing. They're still there, but it was like totally unsustainable. It was like 10 grand a tree, 10,000 trees. Just no. But since then, we've doubled our planting every year. And if we continue on that trend, when you double things, that's exponential growth. Now, we are not precious about this. Everything we do is open source. We want everyone to copy us. We want other organizations and NGOs to be doing this. We want corporates to be doing this. We want massive tree planting. And we want to lift lots and lots of people out of poverty doing it.
Are you collecting some of the localized data that you can start to produce reports on, studies on?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have local data. We have satellite data. European Space Agency has been quite kind to us. We have WhatsApp groups and WeChat groups, and you can actually see real-time stuff happening. You can track trees. We can track the tree to the location if we need to. All of that data. We love data. I mean, I'm a data guy, so
yeah. And we had a guest who came in talking about commercial drone flights. Can you get anything like that, like drone technology, to keep an eye on the forests and take surveys and stuff like that?
Look, there are a couple of people out there who are wanting to mass plant trees using drones, and more power to them. My only concern with that is you need to involve people. If you don't involve local people on the ground, we do a lot of train the trainer. We do a lot of local involvement. We're not arrogant. We're not prescribing things to people. We're offering learning. Just like CoderDojo, we're offering people to learn how to do this better, and then we're offering cash to help them get there, right, on a per tree basis. That's a very different model to flying a drone over somebody else's land and dropping trees on them, which is fine if you get permissions and all the rest of it. More power to you. But those trees, I feel, may not be as secure as the ones that people have grown with their hands and that they harvest every month.
Yeah.
Do you view climate change as the biggest threat to humanity, civilization?
It's the most immediate mass threat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that goes ahead of AI or anything like that?
Oh, AI doesn't bother me at all.
Cool.
We have made enormous progress on artificial intelligence. We've made no progress on artificial sentience. I mean, none. Nothing. And until it's sentient, it is not able to consider us a threat. There's just no reason for it. The best definition of sentience I've seen is being able to suffer. Not really in our interest to create a machine that suffers.
No.
So it is climate change that's your biggest concern?
There are some things we can't do much about. An asteroid could hit us. That's hard. We already talked about pandemics and how I think we can deal with that. Climate change is the hardest one to deal with. I mean, 1 meter of sea level rise displaces, 20 million refugees. Look at how badly we're coping with the refugee crisis we have right now, and multiply that by 20, or 30.
Well, St Kitts and Nevis would be in a lot of trouble if the sea level starts going up, I guess.
1 meter of sea level rise would actually do a lot more damage to central London, if you think about it. Meter of rise. That's well within our lifetimes. That's possible.
Yeah. Florida, famously.
What Florida?
Yeah.
But New York.
Yeah.
You know, downtown Manhattan is not that far above sea level, and you can't think about it in terms of, oh, okay, it goes up a meter, but you know, it's still not there. 1 meter, then the storm surge on top of it.
Yeah, it's net.
Right? It's the net effect of all those disasters. You know, there will be catastrophes.
I mean, you can't even trying to quantify the damage and cost of the New York, of Manhattan getting put under a meter extra of water. It's just billions on billions on billions.
It's much cheaper just to plant trees, I can tell you.
And are you finding quite a warm reception from the powers that be to your solution?
Honestly speaking, I haven't really spent a lot of time since going through the whole UN process. I haven't spent a lot of time with the powers that be. I'm much more interested in working with people on the ground. You know, people on the ground, they have a lot of needs, and if you can fulfill on a lot of those needs simultaneously, they are incredibly passionate about actually knuckling down and doing stuff. They got a lot of grit. You know, somebody. I was at a conference once. There was a sort of mixed, you know, people from developing nations, people from developed nations, and the topic was entrepreneurship. And one guy stood up and said, "But everybody in my country is entrepreneurial. If they're not entrepreneurial, they're dead."
Well, don't you get a feeling like that at the moment? So we see 100,000 entrepreneur proposals a year through our various platforms in our day job. And it's getting the feeling that because so much information is spread, there's so much open source technology, that we all need to be a bit more entrepreneurial. It needs to be, you know, even if with CoderDojo, we don't all need to code, but we need an appreciation of coding. And I think with entrepreneurship, we all need an appreciation of how to be innovative with what we face, you know, the trouble. And maybe you're right, maybe some places just define themselves as that anyway, and they're always thinking of new ways of improving or finding clever hacks around.
I mean, at its fundamental level, entrepreneur means do.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to be a world full of doers. You know, we need to all have purpose.
Not victims.
Not victims. You look at. Here's a funny phenomena that I've seen. You sometimes we'll do a social media campaign, and we'll do some surveys after, and people who click like get a genuine feeling like they've actually done something valuable.
Rather like a plant a tree button.
Yeah. Actually, now one of our partners that planted trees with us previously was Ecosia, and that was great. You know, when people search and they plant a tree just by searching, and Ecosia still do that, which is great. But people would not even do that. They would just click like and say, "I'm done. I've done my good deed for the day. I liked something." You know, there's very little effort in a like. That's the polar opposite, really, of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. I'm going slightly conscious of the time. I think we're running a bit over. But there's one question I wanted to ask you was, given everything we've discussed, and most of the projects we've discussed, they're all ongoing. How on earth do you have the time to, and you know, the mental resources to think about all of them in a meaningful way?
There's two answers to that question. The first answer is use language to enroll lots of teams of people. So every single one of these organizations has their own CEO and their own hierarchy, and I have a fantastic team at RebelBio. I mean, amazing people. You know, great people are the solution to a lot of that. And the other thing is the top tip that I will give you. Do you know why people procrastinate?
Because you sometimes feel like there's too much to do, and you feel guilty because you can't complete the task.
Well, you feel negative, that's true, but the thing that makes you actually procrastinate is because it feels good. When you put that little task off, when you put that big thing off, you get a little hit of dopamine. I can worry about that later. Right? Do you know why people worry?
Because they've got stuff to do?
Nope. People worry for exactly the same reason. You build up this idea that if you worry about it, nothing bad happens, because all the times you remember worrying, nothing bad actually happened while you were worrying.
It's true.
And we don't remember pain anyway, we remember success. So we remember all the times we did worry and nothing happened. So again, we get a little hit of dopamine. We're like, Oh, I've worried about it.
So that's taking action.
Yeah, worrying is like taking action. Procrastination is like taking action. You spend half a day a week worrying if you're an average human.
Sucks.
Which sucks really badly. So here's the hack. Because I did meditation and personal development, and I learned a lot about how to, just stop worrying. Just to turn off that inner voice and just get to work. But it took me years. And one of my guys at RebelBio said, "Hey, Bill, you're calm all the time. How do you stay calm?" And I said, "Well, I spent all this time." He said, "Well, I don't have any time. Can you come up with a hack for me?" And I thought about it. And I went, "You know what?
Tell
Maybe
me.
I can."
Tell me.
And the hack is procrastinate your worries. When you get that worry, it comes up and you're going to worry about it. You just tell that worry, "I'm going to put you off to later." You get the same little hit of dopamine. And it doesn't matter if you forget to worry about it later because it was useless anyway. Procrastinate your worries.
I feel like that's easier said than done.
Pick a worry. Something you're worried about right now.
You're wide open now.
Yeah, I can't think of anything.
Right, good.
I feel great.
It is easier done than said, to be honest. I've tried this with a lot of people now. Before I shared it with him, I tried it out on a whole lot of people. I put it up on Medium. I got lots of people reading it. Everyone that I've talked to has taken it on, has actually found that it works. Now, a few people have said to me, even though I've put off my worries and I got my little dopamine and I got to work, they've still sort of stayed in the background. I've still sort of had them. And I said, very simple, here's step 2. Step 2, save up all those worries and then actually make a little time to focus worry about them. And the way you focus worry is you say to yourself, what is the absolute worst that can happen? And you worry till you find the worst that can happen, which is usually the world ends. And then you ask yourself, what's the best that can happen? Which is usually you win the lottery. And then you ask yourself, what's likely to happen? And then the worry goes away. Now, in that process, you will experience some fear.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is you make yourself, 5 minutes every day and do it in the toilet. Because fear is an amazing laxative.
And there's just a catharsis.
Flush those worries away.
Yeah, literally.
Oh, that was a nice one I heard on a different podcast by a guy who was an ex-Marine called Jocko Willink. He said every time he's confronted by something bad, the first thing he says is good. Doesn't matter what it is, because it makes him at least think of why it's good that this happened. And it's very hard to do. It doesn't mean it's always easy. It just means something could go catastrophically wrong and you could say good because it gives you an opportunity to do it differently, or good because you get to train harder, or good because,
It's setting yourself on the hero narrative rather than the victim narrative.
Yeah, because I do think Bill's right. You can worry for the sake of worrying and then just indulge that worry and feel like your life's spiraling out of control. It's very passive.
Well, who ever solved anything by worrying about it? Ever?
Well, not on purpose. Maybe by accident. I don't know.
Worrying and thinking are two very different things. In fact, if you want to really think about something, you're best doing it talking out loud to yourself. There's this thing in coding called rubber duck debugging. That's where you get an impossible coding problem, and what you do is you read your source code out to your rubber duck, and by actually articulating it, you will almost inevitably find the bug.
That's amazing.
It's the same thing for thinking. If you think out loud, and there are many studies that show this, that you think out loud, you are much more likely to get through the problem than if you try and use the internal, monologue to solve it.
But sometimes I feel like we don't truly want to unearth the problem because it can rise out of the ashes and you think, oh, I really do need to look at this one thing. And now I've articulated it's almost unavoidable to hide away from.
Good.
Good.
That's your very said.
Well, I have a lead in now, I guess, which goes into our sort of final section, which is this area of taking impossible problems that can be inevitably solved. What does that future look like in terms of what you think in the next 5-10 years are your predictions of things that we're inevitably going to solve that seem impossible or like sci-fi to us now?
Well, we're going to upgrade ourselves. And right now that's kind of impossible. Like, we can do a few implants and things, but we are going to upgrade ourselves big time.
You think hardware or you think biological? Both.
I don't see the distinction.
Okay.
But like, it's just our existence on this little mortal coil is just too short and painful as it is. So you're not going to prevent people from using this tech, and the tech is getting super sophisticated. So you want to change your eye color, you want to make yourself stronger, smarter, faster. You want to make sure you don't get cancer. These are all engineering problems now. And very soon, those interventions are going to happen. And this, to me, means that we really have to become a spacefaring species, because we don't have room on this planet. We have plenty of resources above this planet.
So if you saw a viable solution for sort of asteroid mining or collection of space materials right now, as a venture partner, would you consider getting into that realms of backing?
It's not my thing.
Right.
But if it was my thing, sure.
And do you think reusable...
I mean, there's about $400 billion worth of, harvestable materials on any reasonable metallic asteroid. You can actually, with today's technology, $400 billion will actually buy you quite a ride to harvest that stuff.
And you think this our increased interaction with space will start increasing in the next sort of 10 years? Because I know they just said that Japanese billionaire is being sent around the moon, is he not? Do you think that will become more part of the common dialogue?
I think it has to, and that's another area where we really have to, get off our backside and get off planet.
You're still going to have to be travelling by boat if you're not careful. People could be flying around the moon, and you'll.
Well, in order to be off planet in a meaningful way, we need to generate energy sources off planet, and that's very doable too.
Are we interested in the moon at all, do you think?
Yeah, we should be.
So, because I feel like a lot of conversations are skipping straight to Mars, and that bothers me for two reasons. One, I think in trying to solve the issue of living on Mars, which is extremely difficult, we're ignoring terraforming parts of the planet. And secondly, I kind of think we're constantly moving beyond the moon, which is, 5 to 7 days or something away instead of 9 months or 6 to 9 months.
More importantly, the energy budget on the moon is so much simpler. I mean, they've discovered, subsurface water on the moon.
Rocket fuel,
and rocket fuel and air and everything else you want. Plus, it's got a huge amount of solar collection space.
Yeah.
So the energy budget on the moon is fantastic. The energy budget on Mars, not so great. If you wanted to look into the furthest future, we'll probably create a biotech engineering solution to terraform Venus. Because Venus's energy budget is even better than ours, and global warming, biologically, can be reversed. And Venus is an example of runaway global warming.
Wow, that'd be cool.
That's a long way in the future to terraform Venus with WeForest trees.
Well, it won't be WeForest trees, but it might be a relative of Aerobacter orogenies. You never know.
And from the sublime to the more mundane, is there a startup-related book or resource or tool that you'd recommend to people listening?
I'm very fond of Grit.
Yes,
it's a new book that came out. I think that's fantastic. I'm very fond of an old book called The 1 Minute Manager.
Cool.
Because a lot of startups just, they've never managed anybody before. And 1 Minute Manager isn't the perfect management book, but at least it gives you a clue.
And quite quickly.
Yeah, quite quickly. It's a very small book. Yeah. It's a very, very good book, though.
I think there should be a lot of books there which inform people about what they don't know in 1 minute, because I think there's so many industries we look at and people just make sweeping generalizations, and you just a minute glance at how complicated it is would be nice.
Yeah.
And I think I had down here a single thing that we should all do more of when it comes to preventing climate change. I guess we've already answered that.
Oh yeah,
but
plant trees.
But I guess to follow on, is it worth saying that it's worth asking you whether you still support all the other activities that are going on in that area?
Sure.
It's not just trees are the solution, but it is we have to make a sustainable shift to renewables and.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you got to include in renewables things like thorium reactors, where
what?
they make thorium reactors.
First time I've heard of this.
Okay, so back in when nuclear power was starting to be a thing, there were two choices for reactor design. One used uranium and plutonium, and the other one used another heavy metal called thorium. Now, thorium you can harvest easily from seawater. You can harvest uranium from seawater too, but thorium's much easier. But the nuclear reaction of thorium leaves almost no waste. It's a little bit slower, it's a little bit cooler, but it leaves almost no waste, and you can get all of your thorium from seawater. Thousands of years of energy at our current expansion rate. And harvesting thorium out of seawater really doesn't hurt the seawater that much.
Especially if the sea level's rising.
Is there anyone doing this?
Yeah, there's quite a few. Like if you look it up, there are projects. One of the problems we have is that nuclear power fell out of favour so badly that hardly anyone studies it.
Yeah.
And so most of our nuclear physicists and engineers are quite old.
Yeah.
So we need to actually breathe some new life into that. Fission reactions are also fusion reactions are also going to be very good. But thorium is actually a pretty good right now technology. If you create the right kind of reactor design, it can be very stable, and you've got to consider that a renewable.
Do we get into net positive energy fusion? Because don't they say that it's basically about equal now, or still just a bit loss making to make fusion?
It's a bit loss making, maybe equal. Fusion reactors are very complex pieces of kit. Thorium reactors are far less complex pieces of kit. At the point where we get fusion reactors to really work, fantastic. But I'm looking at what can we do right now. If you were to do a Manhattan-style project on thorium reactors, you could probably power most of the world with thorium reactors within a decade. It's pretty quick stuff. And they can't go supercritical. It's impossible. So you've got a very safe system that automatically shuts down, that produces very little waste. That's, to me, a whole bunch of boxes ticked.
Spellbinding.
Yeah.
Just like literally just...
Well, yeah, I mean, on that note, I can't believe we have to end, but we do have to end at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because also, I feel like we're stopping you getting on with really productive ways of saving the planet.
I feel like we've only seen the tip of the iceberg, and you're a fount of wisdom and knowledge. But to end, is there anything that you'd like to ask of our listeners?
Sure, please. Figure out ways to get the companies that you know and are involved in planting trees with WeForest or any other organisation that's doing the right thing. Because it's great that you plant trees yourself, and one tree sequesters roughly a ton of CO2, so that's a lot of trips across the Atlantic you can feel good about. It's even greater if you can get the companies that you're involved with, that you buy from, that you sell to, that you work with, to really put pressure on getting them to plant lots and lots of trees, because our engines of commerce are the most powerful engines that we have ever as a species created. And we could solve this problem so much faster if we all got together and did that with our engines of commerce, and we could make a profit doing it.
Amazing.
Bill, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely great.